Let's call a meeting of the MTA Bus Operations Committee to order. First of all, are there any public speakers, Celeste?
Yes, we have one public speaker, Mr. Chairman. Murray Bowden.
Really?
This is now the 6th meeting in this series. It will go to 12 meetings in the last 2 weeks. This is the 3rd of 9 this week. Talking about information distribution. At the last meeting, the police department talked about how many people were walking around with cell phones and they were being stolen. A couple of problems today. One is that this booklet that you distribute should be distributed in an electronic form that is usable. There are no hyperlinks in what you've put out there, so technically you're correct. It's available, but not in a usable form. Each of those people sitting at this board meeting should have a computer in front of them. And these materials should be stop being distributed in paper form except as requested as soon as possible. The particular issue I have with bus is also an information problem. How much information does the driver need to see in front of him when he's driving the bus? Basically, he needs to know the speed of the bus as a digital number. Culturally, we still use analog. That's a cultural problem that's facing all of us today. My granddaughter lives with this and this. She helped me at the NMTIC meeting in presenting the fact that she at 11 can handle this much better than paper and pencil. How do we begin the transition to changing the display on the bus to a digital number? A couple of other things. You don't need to know how many miles the bus ran since it was bought. You don't need to know the temperature of the fluids or the pressures. It's run by computer anyhow. The other issue is the size of the steering wheel. We've always had large steering wheels, but the steering is controlled by computer. You can run your buses by joysticks. And in fact, you have had 2 buses run by joysticks in the past. You just didn't continue to use them.
Thank you, Mr. Bowden.
This will continue for the next 2 meetings. I've been asked to keep it short today.
Thank you. As we move along into the meeting, I'd like to have a motion to approve the minutes from the January 23rd, 2012 meeting.
I move they be approved.
Okay, and second, we have any changes or comments? We know of one.
There's one change on page 4 of the book. The minutes contain an extra word in the first sentence of the service change section. It should read there were 3 service changes reported, not 3 New York City transit service changes reported last month.
Okay, moving along to the work plan. Are there any changes to the committee's work plan?
None.
None. Okay. And now introduction and by the President, Darrell Irick.
Good morning, Chairman Loader and members of the committee. I would like to welcome Joe as our new bus committee chairman. And also, I don't see him here today, but Andrew Saul is a part of the committee also. With that, I'd like to move forward to Mr. John Kivlahan to review the operations report.
The performance highlights for the month of December 2011 and the past 12 months are on pages 11 and 12 of the committee book. For the month of December, combined bus MDBF was 4,010 miles, up 16% compared to December 2010 levels. AM and PM pullouts as well as completed trips were 98.3, 98.8, and 98% respectively. Over the 12-month period, combined MDBF was 3,412 miles, down 6% compared to the prior period. It should be noted that the fourth quarter of 2011 has seen a 6.5% increase compared to the same period in 2010, reversing the downward trend that we had been experiencing for most of 2011. AM and PM pullouts, as well as completed trips, were 98.4, 99, and 97.9% respectively, all lower by less than 0.5%. This completes the operation report. Are there any questions?
Would like to introduce Steve Vidal for the safety report.
Thank you. Our comments for the November customer and employee safety performance are found on page 13 of your book. The 12-month rate for combined bus collisions per million miles traveled across the 3 bus units is 3.1% higher than it was in the prior 12-month period. Although the 12-month average rate is higher, performance has continued to trend positively overall since we experienced the adverse impact of the December and January storms of last winter, and has decreased 2.2% in the right direction this month. A review of preliminary year-end data reveals that the positive trending continues to the end of the year. With regard to collision injuries, November showed a monthly improvement of 28.6% across 3 agencies, and we are down 7% in the right direction over the comparable 12-month period. There was an increase in customer accidents and customer accident injuries in November. We are carefully reviewing this trend in light of the introduction of a variety of new bus models, which we have taken delivery of over the second half of 2011. In the near term, we're continuing to provide supplemental training to all operators and conducting in-service safety campaigns. While the change in performance is low in terms of whole numbers at each bus entity, and the statistical trend is beginning to pull back toward the right direction relative to October, we will continue to update the committee on our efforts and include a full analysis of this performance at the upcoming March 2012 safety presentation for the committee. The 12-month rate for employee on-duty lost time accidents is 5% higher on a regional basis. While the anomaly of June's adverse trending at New York City Transit still accounts for the majority of the recent 12-month average increase, overall performance has been trending in the right direction, as I noted at last month's meeting, and is down 5.7% on a regional basis this month. We anticipate that the positive trending for MTA Bus will continue in 2011, and that New York City Transit's performance will also continue to normalize over time as the 12-month average progresses into 2012. This concludes the safety report. Are there any questions?
Steve, I have one question. Going back to your comments about safety increasing in November and the new models, these are the new models that have a very flat
We're introducing a significant number of low-floor buses to the fleet, and we're introducing them to service areas that previously had not experienced them. Mm-hmm. And it's a phenomenon that we've noticed in the past. When we train our operators on how to operate the vehicles. The riding public, however, sees a very welcoming entrance when they walk on, and they're unfortunately not grabbing on as they walk in because it looks so inviting. And similarly, when you're exiting, they're not holding on as they're exiting the doors. Historically, we've seen that when we introduce that kind of vehicle into the service area, there's about a 2 to 3 month acclimation that eventually normalizes. We are doing some outreach, particularly through the command center with canned messages to the riding public that you should be holding on even when you're exiting a low floor bus.
Great.
Are those being introduced to both MTA Bus and New York City Transit?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Thank you. And now I'd
Mr.
like to...
Chairman,
Alan.
I noticed that these statistics are for November. Is there a reason why we can't have this, the same month that we're looking at everything else?
Historically, New York City Transit has had an extra 1 month lag in the accident reporting for safety statistics, both collisions, customer accidents, et cetera. So we had to, when we were doing MTA Bus, we were actually consistent with the other metrics in operations performance. But because of the analysis that goes on within the safety area to essentially classify and close out the data, we have been on that's when we received the data. It's a 1 month extra lag over and above the other metrics we have in the other operations areas.
Yeah, and let me also add to that there's a lag period in the amount of time a claim can be filed. So this accounts for blind accidents that may be a result of a claim that comes in that may not have necessarily been reported. So it's a more comprehensive number. If you do it earlier on, there may be some claims subsequently filed that wouldn't have been reflected if we reported it a month earlier. That's basically the reason why we delayed it over years.
And Steve, your prognostications for December numbers, you spoke to that, right?
Yeah, we have. I mean, I'm pretty sure I know what the end of year numbers are,
Right.
and but you hate to publish them without
Absolutely.
knowing for sure that they're right. But the trend, very positive trend line for December as well.
It generally would only go up from the numbers that you have. It's only a function of going higher by virtue of claims being filed
yes.
late.
That's correct.
Alan, would you like to, well, we can talk about this later because it would be better.
I understand what you said. I'm not sure that I agree with the decision not to be reporting on a more timely basis. So, but we can talk about it some more.
Agreed.
Okay.
There being no further questions, I'd like to introduce Tom Charles for the report on paratransit.
Good morning. The paratransit report is on page 15. This will be the final report containing able ride data. For the month of December 2011, accessorized paratransit ridership was up 13% compared to December 2010 levels. Able ride ridership levels increased by 2.2% from December 2010 levels. The 12-month ridership levels were down by 0.8% in accessorized and 4.4% in able ride. Over the 12-month period ending December 2011, there was a 4.3% decrease in accessorized requests for service. Able ride experienced a 4.5% decline in requests for service over the same 12-month period. Favorable no-show trends continued in the month of December as accessorized and able ride passenger no-shows declined by 41.9% and 45.5% respectively. At our previous meeting in January, I reported our plans to expand the test of the prepaid debit card to paratransit-eligible customers in the boroughs of Brooklyn, Queens, and the Bronx. The broker for car service has a portion of their network base that accepts electronic fare medium. We identified 395 subscription customers and asked if they would participate in the test. At present, 75 have accepted and should begin the use of the prepaid debit card this week. At this point in time, we have established significant cost reductions through greater use of car service and taxi. The continuation of this test has more to do with the learning how to administer a prepaid debit card system, design internal controls to enforce security, and minimize fraudulent activities. This completes the paratransit report.
Are there any
We have three things. We have our AVLM GPS, which has made better connections. We've been on a campaign asking our customers to provide us with their cell phones. Generally, they're out in the street. We call them at home. We miss them. The cell phone gives us direct access. And we've made a conscious effort to have the drivers really make an effort to look for the customers instead of just sitting in the vehicle waiting.
And the broker car is only 75 out of 395. What are we doing to increase participation?
It's
or
ongoing.
Widen the network. I know we really wanted to make sure that we had the subscription service of the guys you wanted to, or the individuals you wanted to use. So 75 seems like a low number.
It started the same way with our taxi in Manhattan. People start to see the reports, get word of mouth, and then they start to volunteer to participate. So it was a hesitancy at some point. It's new.
So we haven't actually started that broker program yet?
No, we've started the broker,
right.
but we're now capitalizing on the fact that the broker has some electronic fare medium in his fleet.
Thanks.
Any further questions? Okay. There being none now, Tom Del Soro will present the financial and procurement reports. Tom?
Good morning. The December fixed route ridership report is shown on page 14 of your book. For the month of December 2011, average weekday ridership increased at all three agencies when compared to December 2010. MTA Bus, average weekday ridership was up 5.7 in December 2011. Long Island Bus rose by 2.4%, and New York City Transit Bus increased by 4.8% for the same period. In December, average weekend ridership was up at New York City Transit Bus by 0.2% and MTA Bus by 3%, while decreasing at Long Island Bus by 1.4% when compared to December 2010. Express bus ridership on weekdays increased at New York City Transit in December by 5.4% and 2.1% respectively in MTA bus. Now, the December 2011 increases are primarily due to the low ridership that we had on weekdays at the very end of December 2010 when we had the blizzard that began on December 26th. So when you adjust to exclude the blizzard week, average school day ridership data reflected a very slight gain for MTA bus of 0.2% and ultimately decreases for New York City Transit of 1.9% and 1.4% for Long Island bus when you took out the blizzard week. For calendar 2011 as a whole, total bus ridership was just under 814 million as compared to 848 million in 2010. That's a 4% reduction in total bus ridership. Bus fare box revenue increased by 4% to almost 1.1 billion in 2011. For the calendar year, weekday ridership decreased by 3.8% in 2011 from an average of 2.7 million a day to 2.6 million daily riders. And combined Saturday and Sunday ridership in 2011 fell by 5.8% over 2010 levels. If there are no questions on ridership, I'll move into the revenue and expense budget report.
With questions, yes, Commissioner Capelli.
4.5% reduction in ridership in New York City bus. What do we attribute that to?
Peter, do you want to jump in?
Overall, the ridership trends they vary throughout the city. So Manhattan has been consistently declining over the last 7 or 8 years. Brooklyn has been a more recent phenomenon. The outer boroughs, Bronx, Queens, and Staten Island have been stable overall. And then on the express bus side, it's just most broadly linked to the economy. We, I think, have started to see a turnaround in the fall with that ridership, which in New York City Transit is primarily Staten Island express bus.
Peter, to what extent, if any, do you think that the reductions in service and the elimination of some service has contributed to the drop in ridership, with people just getting frustrated?
I think there was some discussion of this at the prior committee meeting. As I said before, Manhattan has been pretty consistently declining regardless of the service cuts. In some of the other parts of the city, ridership has been growing. We've added some. In other areas, we clearly did lose, and we went over that in the summary about 6 months ago on the 2010 when we analyzed all of those. There's been some cases where ridership has shifted to the subway network. There have been other cases where, in fact, we believe that the cuts resulted in decreased ridership.
Thank you.
Any other further questions?
Okay.
Financial report.
The revenue and expense budget report is summarized on page 16 and reflects preliminary 2011 calendar year results. For full year preliminary 2011 fare box revenues for fixed route services, when we compare it against the final estimate, overall was $1 million better than, or 0.1% over the final estimate. MTA bus was 0.9 over the estimate. Long Island bus was 0.6% worse than the final estimate for fare box revenue, and transit bus was essentially flat. On the expense side, full year non-reimbursable accrued expenses were $6.7 million higher than the final estimate. MTA bus and Long Island bus preliminary actuals were above the final estimate by $4.6 million and $3.5 million respectively. In MTA bus, the overruns were mostly due to health and welfare, pension, and OPEB timing issues, while Long Island bus accruals reflected higher pension and re-estimates for claims. New York City Transit bus, as compared to the final estimate, was $1.4 million better than the final estimate. That concludes the finance and expense side. If there are any questions, take them now. Okay.
There being none, let's do procurements.
Okay. There are 4 procurements this month, beginning on page 49 of the book, representing a total expenditure of $7.6 million for the committee's approval. There is 1 non-competitive procurement, 1 competitive procurement, and there are 2 ratifications. With regard to the competitive procurement, on page 57, A slight clarification in the staff summary text that you see needs to be acknowledged pertaining to the commentary on reduced fare applications. We're going to ask Tom Charles to just address this clarification briefly.
Thank you, Tom. The assessment centers that we have contracts with primarily perform assessments of paratransit eligibility applications, but occasionally our reduced fare program will have a individual that they wish to have observed by our assessment center personnel. So they have just a very small percentage of this, little about 11% of the funding is for reduced fare over these 2 years. However, for paratransit, we perform 100% of the in-person assessments for all applicants.
Okay. Before we go to questions or any comments about the procurement actions, do we have a motion?
I move the procurements be adopted.
Second. Okay. Any questions, comments? Okay. There being none, all in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Now to Norm Silverman for service changes. Norm?
Good morning. There are 2 bus service changes included as information items in this month's agenda. Both service changes are for MTA Bus. The first service change on page 60 is a revision of the travel path and southern terminus of the BXM-3 and BXM-4 express routes in Madison Square Park in the southern portion of Midtown to address traffic congestion issues on East 26th Street, which is a very narrow street. This change is in response from the local community to relocate the buses from East 26th Street and consolidates the layover with other express routes along the southernmost portion of Madison Avenue. It would be implemented in early March. The second MTA bus service change on page 65 is a revision of the Q35 local bus turnaround path in Midwood, Brooklyn, to use Avenue I rather than travel through the center of the very congested Flatbush Avenue-Nostrand Avenue intersection. This revision would also remove the conflicts with the southbound B41 route for limited bus stop space on Flatbush Avenue by relocating the Midwood terminus of the Q35 to Avenue H, across from the current last stop and first stop, and adjacent to the southern terminus of the 2 and the 5 rapid transit routes. We plan to implement this change in April.
Are there any questions about these changes? Yes.
Norm, on the Q35, that Avenue H layover is also going to be the first stop?
Yes.
So you can board there?
Yes.
Thanks.
Okay. Okay. No further questions? Okay. Norm, any more? Yep.
An additional service-related information item, our committee agenda includes the semi-annual report of bus performance indicators and the passenger environment survey, which we call PES, for the Department of Buses covering the second half of calendar 2011. This report begins on page 70 of your book. Of the 38 separate indicators measured in the PES report, 32 indicators remain unchanged, and 6 indicators declined when compared to the second half of 2010. The next PES report will be presented to the committee in September, covering the first half of 2012. At that time, we will also provide a separate report for the first-ever compilation of PES data for MTA Bus, in addition to the New York City Transit Bus report. Peter Caffiero, to my left, is here to answer any questions the committee may have on the Transit PES report that's before you.
Are there any questions? Yes.
Yes. Regarding weight assessment on the... I want to make a note, and I want to ask some questions, that the weight assessment for Manhattan is low, is just, I think, the lowest, and that happens to be the borough where we're seeing decreases in ridership. And in particular, there's some buses that are, seriously behind in meeting the overall goal. The M3, the M4, the M7, the M15. These are high ridership buses, M101. I suppose it's because of traffic, but what are we doing to address those issues? And even in the other boroughs, there are some that are, anything that's, I think, below 80, something should be looked at.
So we're focusing on that, particularly in Manhattan, is definitely congestion is the biggest issue for us, and as you know, weight assessment is really a measure of how regular the buses are showing up. Manhattan historically has had issues with on-time performance, and going back to my days of running the road, the key issue there is weight assessment. John Kivlahan now is running the operations, and he's taking a real close look at that across the board in terms of weight assessment on all the routes in all the boroughs that are on-time performance routes. So we are focusing on it. It's going to take a little time, but we're on top of it.
I know it's the same thing in Queens, although they're close, but the lower performing routes are usually higher ridership routes, which means there's more people being delayed, which might be a reason for one of the reasons for a decrease in ridership. The unreliability of service is going to take either they're going to take the subway, or in some of these cases in Queens, they're driving.
Yeah, it's an ongoing issue. Actually, I think this week we have a meeting set up with Commissioner Khan, City Khan, in terms of enforcement and what have you. So, again, it's something that we have to continue to monitor and address route by route.
That's the Commissioner of Bus Lanes, is
Absolutely.
Commissioner Merdlin. Okay.
Bike lanes. No.
What determines which buses were chosen for these observations?
Well, I'll let Peter.
Peter.
Yeah. I wanted to know on the last one that, and it then gets to your question. These are historic. I think there were 40 routes that were selected 15 years ago as a pilot that was intended to be expanded to all routes. These are samples. We have individuals go out and go to time points and on a random basis throughout the city, as we do with our other PES type data. We now have with bus time potentially eventually a tool that will allow first of all more real time seeing what's going on, but also in terms of the statistics. So if you'll note there's a footnote here, the B63, which now has had bus time for a while. This data actually is being generated from the bus time data, and so over time, we need data capacity issues. Some things need to be resolved, but over time, this is something that will become a better indicator than it has been historically.
Being that Staten Island is now totally covered, that should flavor the next batch of these, or?
Yeah, there may be. I'm not absolutely sure the second half of the year report will be fully up in Staten Island. There's some data processing issues that need to be resolved, but certainly by next year we should be rolling that out.
You actually anticipated a question I wanted to ask, which was how bus time, what kind of reports are going to be generated off of the equipment that we now have into place, and how often are we going to get to see those reports?
So we're developing a scope of work around that now, but there's multiple pilots out there right now where in terms of apps that look at the performance of bus time. We have an internal vision where we're going to use that feed, the GPS feed, to manage our service, where the dispatchers, road superintendents will be able to prevent bus bunching or to mitigate bus bunching when it happens, and to adjust routes more effectively than the tools that we have today. Today we have a very manual, paper-oriented process. Now we can actually see the buses in real time on the screen and address them and at this point, we have a pilot working in our bus command center where we're in Staten Island. We're talking to bus operators, bus by bus, to mitigate issues around congestions, weight assessment, and on-time performance.
So you'll be developing reports and sharing with the committee as time goes on when we move. We only have Staten Island now, but we'll be able to move to other boroughs.
Absolutely, that's the goal.
Okay. And what timetable are we talking about?
Well, we see it evolving over the next year or so. I don't want to commit to you. I get back to you, Alan, in terms of how soon we will be able to give you some type of reporting, but it'll be on a borough-by-borough basis. Right now, as you know, Staten Island is the only borough that's dealing with this. And the hope is by the end of 2013, all boroughs would have bus time. So it's certainly by that time, the process should be perfected.
In the meantime, we should take some of the Staten Island information, either quarterly or semi-annually, and start showing what we are finding.
Right. We will do that.
Okay. How many apps are we up to, by the way? Every day I see there's a new Staten Island bus time.
There's multiple apps right now. I couldn't give you an exact. Just 5 this weekend. Yeah.
I'm waiting for the first phone call from Staten Island due to bunching that we ask people to get off one bus and go in the bus in front. Just give me a heads up before you do that so I can. Thanks.
Okay, thank you.
Budget?
Okay, the final information items in this month's agenda are the financial reports that are prepared in accordance with the MTA's annual budget process. The reports that begin on page 82 include for MTA Bus the 2011 final estimate, the 2012 adopted budget, which includes the monthly allocation of all financial and position data, and the 2012 through 2015 February financial plan. For Long Island Bus, we only include the 2011 final estimate. These are consistent with the financial plan approved by the board in December, and as you know, the corresponding financial data for the Department of Buses was presented within the consolidated reports of New York City Transit's committee meeting earlier today. And that's it from my end, and I'll hand back to Darrell for final comments.
Okay, that concludes the meeting for today. Are there any further questions?
Question, Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
How is the rollout of the bus partitions for the drivers faring?
We've met with many challenges. As you know, it's a very, very complicated initiative. As it relates to new bus deliveries, they're going along fine. Those are the best performing barriers. We haven't had that level of success with some of the buses that we have to retrofit. So we meet with the union folk and our CMO area regularly. I mean, it's an ongoing process. It's a very complex issue. We have multiple bus types, and the barrier has to be designed for each bus type. Henry, did you want to add?
Same company that's doing it for each bus type? Or no?
No, several different manufacturers.
Oh, I see.
We have around 400 of them in service now in multiple boroughs. There's four to five boroughs have them.
Thanks.
I received an email over the weekend from, I guess, a constituent who wants us to consider a bus stop at the corner of Murray and West Manhattan for the M20.
We're evaluating that. I received this. We all pretty much received the same email.
Okay.
And we are evaluating that right now to see whether or not it's worthy of having a stop at that location due to the new building that's been built there in Battery Park. Okay. Yes, Mr.
May
Mergler.
I respectfully request that Darrell or somebody on his staff take a good hard look at the weekend service at Woodlawn in terms of providing added service or service in that area. There have been complaints from all of the elected officials representing that area that their constituents have not been provided the kind of service on the weekend that they think they need.
Okay. Okay.
All right. There being any further questions? Move to adjourn. Thank you. Second. Thank you very much. Not as pretty. I'm not even. We're done. Right.